Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this masterclass in association with the global compliance provider TMF Group and co-produced by FDI Intelligence and the bank. And once again, here in London, joined by Mark Weil, the CEO of TMF Group. Welcome back, Mark.
Thank you.
Mark, today we will discuss ESG practices, these three letters that have really reshaped the way investors and financiers do business and operate. From a regulatory standpoint, to what extent this whole narrative and the rise of ESG finance and standards has been enshrined in new laws and regulations?
Well, so generally not so much, although the EU is an exception. It's pushing harder, and within that France has been a particular proponent. So there are countries where it is legally required. But in the main, this is something that's being driven by a form of activism coming both from the investment community, so funds and private equity and others, but also employees. And I will say, I think the lessons from what happened around Ukraine and the wave of companies that decided to take action unlocks a sense in which expectations are going to be higher both on governments and from employees, that companies now do things about things that aren't necessarily immediately about their business, but about their environmental, social governance responsibilities.
So do you want to tell us how TMF Group has reacted to some of these challenges? You have offices in Moscow, you have offices in Kiev. What has been your own reasoning and what kind of measures as CEO of the company you have taken?
Sure. Well, we, like most firms, we have corporate values. One of those is integrity. We have colleagues in Kiev, we have colleagues in Russia too. And my view was that we needed to do something to send a signal that we meant what we said about our integrity and our looking after our colleagues. And so I took a decision that we would exit our clients where there was a Russia UBO. And that for me felt like an adequate signal of solidarity with the colleagues whose lives have been ruined, greatly reshaped by events. But bringing it back to an ESG point of view, that wasn't a result of a regulatory pressure. It wasn't really even directly a result of pressure on me from investors or colleagues, but it was a sense of responsibility. And I do think if you look forward, when we measure complexity in our index, we tend to look at the things that you can read in the statute books. But ESG is slightly softer than that for the moment. It comes from a sense of commitment to a duty of care from our shareholders' expectations, our employees' expectations. And I would say in the next 10 years, the pressure for firms to act on matters of climate change, ethical standards and duties of care, their own governance, are going to be very acute and almost as acute as anything that's written in formal regulation.
So more than, strictly speaking, regulatory compliance is more of a compliance to or alignment with the values of your stakeholder
Exactly. A lot of firms have done a lot to promote values, to put effort into themes around their purpose that go beyond the immediate and talk about the greater good they create. And with social media and the activism that enables, I think a lot of companies realize they can no longer simply say, well, we're here to fly planes or file accounts or whatever it is that your business does, but you do have wider duty of care. And that's tough, right? I'm a CEO myself, and it's tough to balance that. But I think you now have to think about complexity, not just in terms of ESG, but also what you have to do to satisfy those values that you yourself committed to.
Totally. And I guess for leaders or companies, this is an opportunity, but also a big challenge to understand those values and to uphold to those values as probably was the case with this crisis in Ukraine.
I think so. I think it's also an opportunity to prove that you mean, and I think there can be moments where there is an alignment of interest between what you're trying to do and a strong purpose and commitment. And so I don't think it's always a conflict, but it does mean as you go into new countries, you have to be thinking about, what will my employees feel about that regime and the way it runs things. Windfall taxes are in fashion at the moment, and the sense of, is the government I'm exposing myself to, what are their considerations? So unfortunately, I think the formal rule book is the main aspect of complexity we talk about, but there's an increasing informal one created by those wider stakeholders and possibly their expectations elevated by the big response to Ukraine around how we all going to respond to the next thing that comes along. Could be a conflict, could be governmental action, human rights or otherwise. But there is, I think, growing expectations on all firms around that informal kind of form of complexity.
Thank you, Mark, also for these comments and insights from the perspective of a leader of a company that has to deal with these issues on a daily basis. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll come back with a third iteration of this masterclass series where we will discuss the way the global economy has emerged from the COVID-19 pandemic and the kind of regulatory challenges this has brought along. Until the next time.